Little Emma was crying in the corner, refusing to join her friends. "I'm too slow, Grandpa Thomas," she whispered. What this loving grandfather did next didn't just dry her tears. It created a memory that would last forever and inspire an entire neighborhood. But the real magic of this story hadn't even begun yet. On that sunny spring morning, silence reigned, as usual, in house number 47 on Maple Street. 78-year-old Thomas Johnson was looking out at the garden from the kitchen window. Holding his morning coffee on the arms of his wheelchair, he watched the neighbors' children playing in the street. Thomas's life had completely changed 3 years ago. After a car accident, he could no longer use his legs. But this strong man had never lost his optimism about life. Until that morning, when his 6-year-old granddaughter Emma came home crying. "Grandpa," the little girl called out, sniffling. She had thrown her school bag on the floor, her eyes completely red. Thomas turned his wheelchair toward Emma. "What happened, sweetheart? Why are you crying?" Emma wiped her nose and hung her head. "There's a race at school, but I don't want to participate." "A race? That's wonderful. Why don't you want to participate?" And at that moment, Emma's answer broke Thomas's heart into pieces. "Because I'm too slow, Grandpa. I run slower than everyone. My friends laughed at me and said, 'You'll come last anyway.'" Thomas's eyes filled with tears. The brokenness he saw in this little angel reminded him of that terrible day 3 years ago. The day when doctors said, "You will never walk again." But Thomas knew that some races aren't won with legs. Some races are won with heart. And at that moment, a crazy plan began to form in his mind. But the consequences of this plan would change not only Emma, but the entire neighborhood. "Emma, come sit here," said Thomas, pointing to the chair next to him. The little girl sat next to her grandfather, wiping her nose. Thomas took Emma's hands and looked at her. "Can I tell you a secret, sweetheart?" Emma nodded curiously. Grandpa Thomas's secrets were always the most beautiful secrets. "I also felt slow for a very long time. After I got in this chair, it felt like life had left me behind." "But Grandpa, you're not slow at all." Thomas smiled. "Do you know what I discovered? Real speed isn't in the legs. It's here," he said, pointing to his chest, "in the heart and in courage." Emma looked at her grandfather with confusion. "Tomorrow morning, I'm going to show you something. But first, promise me something. You'll participate in the school race." "But Grandpa..." "Promise me, Emma. Trust me." The little girl hesitated, but she couldn't say no to that sparkle in her grandfather's eyes. "Okay, I promise." That night, Thomas stayed awake. He was thinking about the old materials in the garage. Everything had to be perfect for tomorrow's plan, because he knew this wasn't just a race. This was a battle for Emma to regain her self-confidence. Early the next morning, Thomas started making noise in the garage. While Emma was at school, he had asked his neighbor Mary Johnson for help. "Thomas, you've definitely gone crazy," said Mary, the 73-year-old woman holding her head in her hands. "Maybe," Thomas smiled, "but sometimes you need to go crazy. Do you see Emma? That little angel has lost confidence in herself." Mary was trying to understand what the strange device Thomas had attached to his wheelchair was. "So what is this?" "This," said Thomas proudly, "is the vehicle that will show Emma what speed really is." When Emma returned from school in the afternoon, she found her grandfather waiting in the garden. But this time, there was something completely different next to Thomas. "Grandpa, what is this?" asked Emma, her eyes wide open. What was attached to the back of Thomas's wheelchair was a bright blue, strange device with small wheels. It looked like 2 wheelchairs had been joined together. "This is our race car," said Thomas. "Today I'm going to teach you real speed." "But how?" Thomas smiled. "Jump on behind me, sweetheart. We'll see who's the fastest in this neighborhood." Emma hesitated. "Is it safe? Do you trust me?" The little girl nodded without thinking. She always trusted her grandfather. But none of them knew that what was about to happen would become legendary in the neighborhood. Emma sat in the special seat her grandfather had prepared. Her heart was beating fast, but this time not from fear, but from excitement. "Are you ready, champion?" asked Thomas. "I'm ready, Grandpa." And Thomas started turning his wheels. Slowly at first, but then faster and faster. Emma's screams echoed throughout the street. But these weren't screams of fear. These were screams of pure joy. Faster, Grandpa! Faster! Thomas couldn't stop laughing. Emma's laughter was giving him back the energy from years ago. It felt like his legs were working again. They raced to the end of the street. Neighbors were looking out their windows. Some were smiling, some were watching in amazement. "That was incredible!" shouted Emma, out of breath. "Let's do it again." "But first," said Thomas, "let me tell you what a real race is." Thomas sat Emma on the bench in the garden. Both were out of breath, but very happy. "Emma, what did you learn today?" The little girl thought. "That you can go very fast with a wheelchair, too?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, but that's not the main message. The main message is this. Do you know where speed comes from?" Emma shook her head. "From here," said Thomas, pointing to Emma's heart. "And from here," he said, pointing to her courage. "I can't use my legs, but that doesn't make me slow. Because real power is somewhere else." Emma's eyes lit up. "So I'm fast too?" "You are the fastest person I know, Emma. Because your heart is full of love, and your courage is big enough to accomplish anything." But this conversation was just the beginning. Because what would happen the next day would change the entire neighborhood's perspective on Emma and Thomas. The next morning, neighbor Mrs. Peterson, awakened by racing sounds in the garden again, curiously came outside. "What are you doing out here every morning?" she asked, smiling. "I'm teaching Emma real speed," said Thomas. Mrs. Peterson was a 65-year-old woman, and her own grandchildren lived far away. "Can I join too?" Thomas was surprised. "Of course. But how? I can be the runner." And that day, Maple Street's strangest but most beautiful race began. Thomas and Emma with the wheelchair, Mrs. Peterson running, raced from one end of the street to the other. Other neighbors, awakened by the noise, also started watching from their windows. Children came out of their garden gates. "Can we join too?" asked 8-year-old Jake. "Of course," shouted Thomas. And so, a small neighborhood race turned into a big event that united the entire street. 3 days later, the day of Emma's school race arrived. But now Emma wasn't scared. She was excited. "Grandpa, after training so much with you, I'm ready now." When Thomas dropped her off at school, he gave Emma one last piece of advice. "Remember, sweetheart, speed isn't in the legs, it's in the heart." At school, children were lined up at the starting line. Emma was among them. But this time her head was high. She was confident. When the whistle blew, all the children started running. Emma ran too, but not just to win, because she was enjoying running. And the result? Emma didn't win the race. She came third. But this wasn't the most beautiful part of the story. When the race was over, Emma ran to her teacher. "Mrs. Anderson, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Emma, what is it?" "Can my grandpa participate in the race too? He's in a wheelchair, but he's very fast." The teacher was surprised. "Your grandpa? But how?" "He taught me that real speed is in the heart. And Grandpa has the fastest heart I've ever seen." That afternoon, Emma brought her grandfather to school. Teacher, Mrs. Anderson, other students and parents listened to this crazy race idea. "Well," said Mrs. Anderson, smiling, "let's organize a special race." And at that moment, the most beautiful scene emerged in the schoolyard. Thomas was at the starting line with his wheelchair. Emma was next to him, in the special seat attached behind him. Across from them was the school's fastest runner, 10-year-old Michael. "This isn't fair," Michael complained. "A wheelchair gives an advantage." Thomas smiled. "You're right, Michael. So how about I race with one hand?" All the children laughed out loud. Thomas actually put one hand behind his back. When the whistle blew, the most incredible race began. While Thomas turned his wheels with one hand, Emma cheered from behind. "Come on, Grandpa. Show how fast your heart is." And Michael? He was also running with all his might, but he didn't forget to smile. Who cared about the result of the race? Because everyone had won that day. When the race was over, Michael ran to Thomas. "That was amazing. How can you be so fast?" Thomas took Michael's hand. "Because I'm not alone. Emma is with me. And most importantly, I now know what speed really is." What is it? Making others happy, being brave, and never giving up. These make you faster than anything. From that day on, the children at school started calling Thomas the wheelchair champion. But the real champion was Emma, because she had regained her self-confidence. As weeks passed, Maple Street became a completely different place. Every morning, the racing sounds of Thomas and Emma would wake up the street, and now there were neighbors joining them. Mrs. Peterson continued running every morning. 9-year-old Sophie joined with her bicycle. Even 82-year-old Mr. Williams started joining the race with his cane. "This neighborhood has never been so lively," said Mary Johnson. "It's like everyone has become young again." But Thomas knew that what had really changed was something else. A month later, Emma came running excitedly from school. "Grandpa, Grandpa, guess what happened?" Thomas waited curiously. "There were athletics team tryouts at school, and I got selected." Thomas's eyes watered. "That's wonderful, Emma, but I'm not surprised, because you've always had a champion heart. And do you know what the best part is?" "What?" "My coach said, Emma's smile while running motivates everyone. It wasn't my speed that mattered, it was my joy." At that moment, Thomas understood that his plan had worked perfectly. Months later, Emma started winning medals in athletics competitions. But after every race, the first thing she did was run to her grandfather. "Grandpa, I came first today. Congratulations, sweetheart. But you've always been first for me anyway." One day, Emma asked curiously, "Grandpa, did you really do this plan for me?" Thomas thought, "You know, Emma, at first I thought I did it for you. But now I understand that I actually did it for myself too." "How so?" "Because you taught me to live again. You taught me to feel fast again." Years passed. Emma grew up. She went to university, completed her education with athletic scholarships. But every vacation, she returned to her grandfather. And every time she returned, the same ritual continued: wheelchair races. Now Emma also had a little cousin, 5-year-old Amy. And Amy was experiencing the same problem. She felt slow when running. "Grandpa Thomas," Amy said one day, "I also run slowly." Thomas, now 85 years old, smiled. "Then it's time to teach you real speed." And the story continued with the new generation. Today, racing sounds can still be heard every morning on Maple Street. Thomas is now 89 years old, but he's still the fastest wheelchair user in the neighborhood. Emma is now an athletics coach, and the first thing she teaches her students is speed isn't in the legs, it's in the heart. This story teaches us this. Sometimes life's biggest obstacles can actually turn into the most beautiful opportunities. Sometimes love finds a way to overcome every obstacle. And sometimes a wheelchair can be the fastest vehicle in the world, if the heart driving it is full of love. Thomas and Emma's story ends here, but the message it gives never ends. Real champions don't make excuses for obstacles. They find ways to overcome them. And most importantly, no age, no condition can be an obstacle against love and courage. Because in the end, the fastest races are won with the heart.